Welcome to another episode of A Cuppa with a Conversationalist. My name is Con, and yes, no surprises, I have my latte in tow. Let me start by asking you, how is your bank account looking? Well, for many, it's not anywhere near as abundant as they would like it to be. So, how would you feel if I told you there is a direct relationship between your mindset and your bank account? My guest on this episode to share his knowledge and expertise is one of Australia's leading transformational coaches, Rik Schnabel. Rik is a businessman, leader, mentor, author, and coach. Coaches from all over the world respect his expertise and flock to be trained and mentored by him. He is a master of the brain's amygdala. When you're looking for a behavioural expert, Rik is the man. With over 38,000 plus coaching hours, Rik turns the impossible into possible and the can'ts into cans. Rik is not just theory. He is, in fact, living proof. Back in 2002, he was about to be fired and at the bottom of the sales ladder when he had an epiphany. An epiphany which had him become the best salesperson in the company's history. He effectively untrained his own brain, and today he coaches others to design their best life and ultimately live out their dreams. Welcome, Rik.
Hey, Con, how are you?
I am absolutely super. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You are most welcome. I'm very excited to be talking about this topic.
Mate, it's certainly something that is top of mind for me, and it was fantastic that Rebecca introduced us and told me about her experience with you, which was obviously life-changing for her. Mate, I'd like to start with, obviously, to give our audience some context. And we mentioned that you're not just a man of theory, you've lived this. Give us some context. Tell us about Rik's life leading up to 2002. Where was Rik?
Okay, Rik was not in a good place. He kind of, when I talk about the old Rik, he almost seems like a movie or a story I read, because I have no association to that particular guy other than he was me. But I grew up in a very poor neighborhood at a time in the 60s when there was a lot of racial prejudice and all sorts of horrible environments around that. There was a lot of violence. There was a lot of segregation, and I experienced that firsthand. You know, my parents immigrated from Europe, and they were, you know, basically what most people might have called back then a terrible name, wogs. You know, and so essentially, I was ostracized, and I learned a lot about poverty through my parents. My parents used to think that they were the poorest family in all of Australia. They weren't, of course, but they certainly thought they were and acted as if they were. And so I struggled financially. I wanted money, you know, very shallow, I know, but I wanted money as a kid. You know, I used to see all these kids go to the canteen and buy ice creams and drinks and lollies and all sorts of things, and my pockets were empty. And I just thought, how do they get that, and how do I have nothing? So I struggled with this for most of my life. It was a roller coaster of finance, you know, money, no money, money, no money. And so what happened is I got to probably the worst time in my life. You know, I was actually 40. I think I was 41 at the time. I was about to turn 42. I was married, just got married, just had my first child. And my wife reported to me that we had $27 in the bank. That was it. That's wow. All we had, $27 in the bank. And, oh God, the feeling that I felt in that moment was I could just project the future. I saw my family, you know, in a laneway, you know, living in a cardboard box or something. And I was horrified. I was horrified. But worse, I was in a job, like I was getting an income, but I was in a job. They had just taken me off retainer. And the only money that I would make was money that I brought into the company. Now, you don't have to be too clever to know that if a guy, me, for 8 months of my career in this company, I had brought in a total of $3,500. You know that guy's going to lose his job, and I was terrified. But I had something up my sleeve that, in fact, I never used. You know how we read a lot of books, learn a lot of things, but never use them.
Yeah.
Well, that was me, and I had learned neuro-linguistic programming. I had also studied under a very mad American who was teaching me about metaphysics and the law of attraction and all of these sorts of things, but I never really used it. So once I learned that I was, $27, as rich as $27, you incredibly lucky man. And I walked into work and I thought, every day I walk into work, I walk into that office, I feel low. I think about myself in terrible ways. And this one particular day, I stopped at the door and I thought, Rik, this has got to change. When are you going to get this, dude? When are you going to get this? When are you going to drop this I'm the poor kid, label that you give yourself? Mm-hmm. And so I decided to enact and do what I had been taught to do. And I stopped and I said, right, before I walk through this doorway, I am not going to walk in that office the same guy that always walks into that office, the big loser.
Yeah.
I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to walk in like a multimillionaire. And that one idea had me thinking, how would I feel like right now? How would I feel? I had $70,000 credit card debt. I had a mortgage of an apartment that even if I sold it, I wouldn't actually have enough money to buy another one or even get rent. And I thought, I've got to change. I've really got to think about what it feels like to be a multimillionaire. Now, my NLP training told me that I couldn't just think this. I had to feel it. I had to see it. I had to taste it. I had to smell it. And I had to see it. Now, 50% of the prefrontal cortex is responsible for vision. Vision is so critical to success. If you can't see it, you can't have it. So I walked into that office and I remember I was on the 46th floor of the Rialto, and that might sound glamorous, but it wasn't my money. It was the company's money. And it was a tiny little box. Like I could just do this from the back of the office and touch my phone, which never used to ring, by the way.
Okay.
And I got up against the glass and it's just wall to ceiling glass and floor to ceiling glass. And I'm just up against the glass and I'm just thinking to myself, what would it really feel like? And I got this picture in my mind of seeing $13 million in my bank account. I don't know why 13, but
I was just going to say 13. I mean, that's a random number, isn't it? And
very
for
random.
A lot of people, 13 is unlucky, but
yeah, absolutely. But that's another story altogether. It's a big myth. But the thing is, I started to feel it, and I thought, if I had $13 million in my bank account, what would I be feeling right now? And I thought I wouldn't be feeling what I was feeling, outside of the door there. And I certainly wouldn't be thinking the way that I was thinking, and I wouldn't be seeing what I was seeing. So I asked myself, what would you be seeing? So I imagined my office different. I imagined that it was bigger. I imagined that it actually had a couch in it that was leather, that it had a table which was not, particle board with some, permutation on the top, that it actually was beautiful mahogany, that it had a honey wax on it. I imagined that I had a little water fountain feature in my office, and this beautiful music just playing very gently in the background. It was very calming. Now, unbeknownst to me at the time, because I'd since done a lot of research in how do you really create magnificence in your life, what I had actually done is I changed my actual vibrational frequency. Now, they have actually measured vibrational frequency of the body. And when your vibrational frequency of your body and your brain are sitting at around like 20 hertz, for example, that is shame. And I've had a lot of shame about where I was. So my vibrational frequency was very, very low. So what I did is I had brought up my frequency. I felt so different. But then magic happened. My phone rang for the first time, other than the director of the company asking me when you was I going to get sales. When are you going to get a sale?
What's happening there, Rik?
I picked it up, and it was a client. It just happened to be Bunnings. And so I'm talking to this guy, and he said, I want to place an order with you. Now, I didn't even know where the damn order sheets were. I only took one order in all that time. So I had to find a piece of paper.
Did you ask him whether he dialed the wrong number?
Yeah. Well, my previous self might have.
Would have, yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good point.
And so what I did is I started writing down the details of this order, and then we got to the full amount of the order, and I looked at it. I was earning 10% commission. And I looked at the amount, and I was shocked. I was shocked.
What was the value of the order, Rik?
It was half a year's income. It was half a year's income from that one order. Now, this freaked me out because I thought to myself, wow, this hasn't happened before. Did I create this? Did I allow this to come into my life in this moment? So what I did it all again. Went through the whole routine again, got up against the glass, started thinking, instead of making calls that led to nowhere, I just decided I wasn't going to do that anymore. So I got against the glass, and I thought to myself, do it again. Allow yourself to feel. Allow yourself to really feel it. Mind you, there was a little bit of extra tension there. So I thought, let go of this tension. Let go of this worry. Because most people think they work for money. They don't. They worry for money.
Yeah,
and so I just allowed myself to feel it again. And my phone rang again. I picked up the phone, and I started to take this next call, which was another order. I went through the whole routine again, writing down the details. I looked at the bottom line. Weirdly, the difference between the first amount and the second amount was just $1,000. They were so close in amount. This got me thinking. I thought to myself, now I've got a whole year's income in just 2 phone calls.
I was just going to say, so fundamentally, in the space of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it was, you've earned your annual income in
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it wasn't that close. The distance between the first call and the second call actually was a week. It took me a whole week.
Right. Okay.
Which I didn't declare there, but
fair enough.
It took me a whole week to do it again, because there was a part of me that didn't believe it. There was the logical part of me,
the cynic,
the rational part of me that's going, come on.
The cynic's thinking it was just pure coincidence.
Yeah, well, very much so. Because what you're doing is, this seems like a miracle. And, sure, we may accept miracles, but there is a very cynical, skeptical part of, this is nonsense. Come on. You create this. Where's the logic? Where's the rationale?
That's what we're trying to do.
And so from that perspective, exactly, rational and logic doesn't fit manifesting. It really doesn't. You've got to park logic, you've got to park rationale. And so I realized that I'd put some sort of cap on this, and I decided to do it again. And this was another week later. This is in a period of 3 weeks. So I go up against the window and I immediately felt tension. It was like I was putting too much tension in the result. And I thought,
pressuring yourself.
Exactly. And I thought, allow, don't force, don't put pressure on yourself here, allow. And so I thought, who cares if this takes me an hour? If this takes me a whole day, who cares? Let it happen. The weirdest thing was that the next call that I got was the two amounts together.
Wow.
So within 3 weeks, I now have 2 years income. And this blew my mind. This completely blew my mind. And so what happened is I found that even going out and doing sales calls, I took this with me. And I remember I was going out to see, the owners of Noodlebox, and I was in the car and I'm about to go into a meeting, and I'm just sitting there and I'm running through the whole meeting. I can hear them talking. They're asking me questions. I hear myself talking, I'm talking to them, asking them questions, offering advice. And the weirdest thing that happened was essentially, sorry, I've got my dog barking. Can you hear that dog barking? She's got something to say. But essentially what happened was I walked into that meeting, and the freakiest thing was that the conversation that I had in my head and the pictures that I had in my head, I hadn't met these people, so I had to imagine what they looked like. They looked nothing like I imagined, by the way.
That's always the way.
But as we're going through this meeting, they said what I had imagined in this meeting. And they got really excited about what I was proposing. And so I went from a point of the income that I used to earn on an annual basis all of a sudden turned into the monthly income that I was earning. Not every month, but I was looking at my spreadsheet, and I was thinking, oh my God, I'm earning 60,000 this month. Oh my God, I'm earning 85,000 next month. I'm due to earn $120,000 in December based on what I've got in the system. And what happened was a lot of people within the organization couldn't believe this, including the sales director. And he called me one day and he said, I want to know, how are you doing this? How are you doing this? It's obvious between you and I that you probably had one more month and you were going to be out the door. And how are you doing this? He said, look, I'm going to fly down to Melbourne. Let's have a meeting about this. So I remember we went to Crown and we sat in a cafe, and he said, okay, so put it on the table. How have you been doing this? I'm hoping you're doing nothing illegal. I said to him, what would I be doing other than telling all my family members to buy advertising media? What? And if I was doing that, you'd be thinking, wow, what a dedicated employee.
There you go.
But the thing was that I said to him, are you aware of quantum physics? Are you aware of how thinking actually permeates attraction? And he said, look, don't start. He said, don't give me that nonsense. And he wouldn't hear it. I started talking to him about my NLP training, about building better relationships with people, building rapport and he wouldn't hear that either. So I told him a lie, and I said, look, I'm having more meetings. And he said, I thought so. Fantastic. Keep up the good work. Okay, what do you want? Latte? And that was the end of it. He just wanted to hear whatever met his belief system.
Yeah.
And once it got in and he said, yes, tick, fine, let's get on with it. Because he was earning a lot of money because he was getting a percentage of what I was bringing into the company. But in 3 months, I went from the worst salesperson in the history of the company to being the best that they'd ever had. Yeah. So I went from guy who was about to go out the door to legend. Yeah. And it was incredible. Anything I asked for, I got.
I was going to say, mate, you were the Messiah.
Well, yeah. Other than the walking on the water routine.
Well, if you had stuck around long enough, that probably might have happened as well. Rik, one of the phrases, and you've kind of answered it, but just spend a little bit of time on it. One of the phrases that I've heard, I'd love to take credit for it, but I'm not that clever, is people invariably won't take action. People say, oh, I'm sick and tired of this. I'm, sick and tired of not having any money. I'm sick and tired of this relationship. I'm sick and tired. And people don't ultimately take any action. Nothing really changes until they're sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
And what I heard from you is that moment, that sick and tired, was hearing that, holy crap, I'm about to have a child, or my wife's about to have a child. I got 27 bucks in my bank account, and I know that I'm about 4.5 seconds away from being unemployed. So what are your thoughts on that in terms of that sick and tired of being sick and tired? Do people have to reach the bottom before they finally go, okay, this can't go on?
Well, there's really, in essence, there's only two motivators, the things that really make us do whatever we do. And that's quite simply pain or pleasure. And for someone to change behaviors, what we often have to do is we have to get to the extreme of things, when our entire life is going to transform and make a really big shift or change. And that's often the only time that people will ever do anything. Like statistically, I don't know who counts these things, but statistically, apparently we sit between 60 and 70,000 thoughts a day. And these 60, 70,000 thoughts a day, 95% of them are on repeat. And they're just over and over and over, on the hamster wheel, having those same thoughts. So when someone says, I'm sick and tired, I'm sick and tired, I'm sick and tired, guess what? They get sick and they are very, very tired. From a coaching perspective, quite often I find I'm working with somebody who has hit that threshold. They've been working with a psychologist for many, many years, or they've been on medication for many years, and they've been absolutely depressed. And they usually come to me when they're at their worst, and they're saying, oh my God, I can't even afford you. I'm going, yes, you can. You have to be able to recognize that you're a master manifester. You have mastered and manifested a horrible life through your auditory language. Just keeps cycling over and over. All you have to do is create some shifts there. And, so the thing that happens is people, unfortunately, they often do wait until things are at their worst. It's a little bit like this. I say to all my students and my clients, I say, look, I'm taking a break. When we hit December 15 or whatever the date is that we decide that we're going to take a break, we usually have a 6-week holiday, with the family, do whatever we do. And I say, okay, guys, I'm taking a break. I won't be coaching. I won't be teaching. I won't be doing any of those things.
Won't be answering my phone.
Yeah. And people wait to the very end to go, oh my God, I need a session with you, and we start, I hate to say this, but we start getting the calls. I'm going to take my life. My life is terrible, and you have, like, when you get those calls, You can't just say, "Oh well, look, can you park your suicide note until I finish my holidays?" And I know that sounds terrible, but you know, some people wait to the very end, before doing anything about what they really need to do. The truth of the matter is, people can turn on a dime. They literally can turn and pivot so fast when the need is big enough or when the pressure is great enough. And, pleasure also is something that can be a great motivator, but most people, unfortunately, are so conditioned and so trained to be motivated by pain rather than pleasure. And our whole system, I'm working on another book at the moment, which is all about how conditioned we are. And that was my biggest problem in the beginning. My first 41, 42 years was miserable. I was depressed, I was anxious, I was scared of everything, absolutely scared of everything. I wrote a book called Raw Courage. And I thought to myself, how am I going to start this book? And I thought, I'll start it with my story. Like when I was 7 years old, I got a bike. It was awesome. Wow, I got a bike. All the kids in the neighborhood had their bikes at 4 and 5. I had to wait till 7. But when I got a bike, it was incredible. It was my moment of freedom. But my father said, no riding on the road. And he stood outside of our house watching me as I went round and round and round the block. And, all the people sitting on their porches would go, hi, Rik. Hi, Rik. Hi, Rik. And, I thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. So what I did is I made a decision to jump the gutter, and I was on the road. From that moment, I had freedom. But that's what you've got to do. You've got to make that courageous shift. You've got to, even though courage doesn't exist until you're in fear. So fear has to be present. And, I coach CEOs from Fortune 500 companies, rock stars, movie stars. I've coached so many high-level people. And one thing that I can say, of course, I can't share names, and I will never, ever do that. But one thing that I can say is that those high-level people, they're scared too. They've got big fears. Like one particular guy who is a rock star, you would know him, great voice. We're sitting in, never ever coach a rock star in a hotel, by the way. But we're in a hotel. We're sitting there because you're trying to coach, and people go, "Oh, it's can you have the autograph?" So you never get anything done. But we're sitting there, and he's telling me how terrible his voice is. I said, what are we coaching on today? And he said, my voice. It's terrible. I'm terrible. But what people don't realize is that when those high-level people go out into the space of peers, like my coaching usually gets busy around, the Golden Globes, Logies, all the awards, because they're all freaking out. And so what happens is basically they go among their peers and they compare themselves to all their peers. You get, the late Michael Hutchence comparing himself to Bono, and Bono comparing himself to Michael. And it just keeps going. But, this guy, all of a sudden, around the corner, there's the lounge, grand piano, big black grand piano. This lady starts playing piano. All of a sudden, his ears prick up. And he's a musician. He hears music and he says, just one moment, Rik. And he goes around. And then all of a sudden, before I know it, he's talking to her, asking her to play a song. She is playing this, this ballad, which he's a rock guy. He's not a ballad guy. And he's singing this ballad. And then finally he comes back. We sit down again. And I said, don't you ever BS me on this voice crap. What I just heard just there was amazing. I've never heard you sing like that before. But at the end of the day, it's all belief. Money is belief. Money is expectation. Money is vibration. And it's a little bit like the best way to think about money is think about money like a dog or a cat. You know, if you hate that cat, or you worry about that cat, or you fear that cat or that dog, they won't come. They won't come. Money's the same. You got to love your dog. You got to love your cat. You got to pat them. You got to make them feel safe. You know, and money is a magnet. It comes to safety, security. It comes to people who love it, people who respect it, people who invest it, people who work for it, people who love what they work for. So I was talking about frequency earlier. If you think about it, the way for anyone watching this or listening to this right now, the thing to think about is, what is your frequency? You know, and the way to think about this is, you know, like, for example, Esther Hicks, you know, many years ago spoke about, you know, the emotional frequency scale. And if you type in Google emotional frequency scale, you know, you will see it, and you will see that they measure shame, as I mentioned earlier, at 20 hertz. So if someone's in shame, they are not going to attract money. They're not going to get a promotion in their career. They're not going to get off in that new job. They're not going to attract clients, you know, if they're in business or customers. So shame is a very low frequency. But if you go right up, like if you go right up to 500 hertz, which is very different at 25, you are what they call in a frequency of love. Now, I'm not talking about I love you. You know, I'm not talking about love as an emotional connection, but I'm talking in a space of love. In a space of love, one of the things that I found when I first started Life Beyond Limits, I would get up on stage and talk about my story, talk about my shifts, because I was so passionate about what I could do and what people could get from me. And their lives would shift as a result. So that is a frequency of love. You know, we're now 22. I've been 22 years I've been coaching now. Now, most people would have had probably 3 career changes in that time. And the reason is because people jump into jobs they don't love. People do things they don't love. I'm still doing what I'm doing because I still love it.
Love it.
You know, and that what that does is that creates an energy of abundance. It really, really does. You know, The Secret was a great opportunity. It just didn't go deep enough. You know, there wasn't enough content in there.
Look, it was The Secret was superficial at best. And I would suggest that's probably where a lot of the cynicism came from. You know, because the impression that you got from reading The Secret was that all you had to do was, you know, wish for $1 million and sit there and, you know, meditate, and magically $1 million would appear.
Exactly.
And goodness me, if only that were the case. Rik, one thing I'd like to ask you about here is we talk about, and you mentioned it a moment ago about, you know, the dog and the cat. You know, you love it and it comes to you, and you know, you loathe it and you smack it around the ears and it'll run away. There's clearly a direct relationship between our capacity to attract money, but not only to attract money, but to this power to be able to repel it as well. In other words, I know there's people. And I've been in this situation, so this is speaking from experience. You know, I'll be going, oh crap, you know, I got to get some cash, and then you make a few sales. You know, in the old days, and all of a sudden the commission would be there. You know, a bit like you, and you go, great, I've got this money, but now I've got to protect it. I've got to, like, you know, I can't lose it. What happens if I lose it? And then this fear. It's almost like it just, you get to a point and then it just starts going back down again. Briefly tell us about that.
Well, basically what that is, much of our money stuff actually is imprinted in our brain between 0 and 7. So a large proportion of who we become is pretty much established by 7 years old. And if we say, well, okay, where do we get that information? Where do we get those beliefs and those values and those meta programs and all those ideas? They typically come from our parents, significant people within our family, our school experience, our early school experience. And what happens is, for most of us, the large majority of our creativity is actually lost. Like, they measured that 70% of our creativity disappears by age 7.
I actually read that this morning.
Right. Yeah. And it's a well-known fact. And it is true, because, if you, and please, I'm not demonizing our school system. We have to be educated, but our school system is not too dissimilar to the prison system. We basically, we're told when we can talk, we're told when we can go to the toilet, we have to raise our hands, we're in a uniform, we have to conform, there's rules, guidelines. And I know many people say, well, you've got to have rules, you've got to have guidelines, but no, kids need freedom. Our brain is amazing. It really, really is. But that conditioning, I position myself as a brain untrainer rather than a coach. And the reason for that is I started to realize that much of the work that I was doing was untraining people's brain more than putting information in there. So sure, it's good to train, it's good to learn, it's good to develop, but much of the conditioning that we have pretty much creates these highs and lows. So directly answering your question, those highs and lows are often established as a baby. So, for example, babies typically only cry when they're cold or hot, or when they need food, or when they've, wet their diapers or their nappies. And so that's a signal to say to the parent, I need some attention because I can't do it. I don't have that skill yet. And so if we let our babies cry for too long, particularly when it's food related, what happens is we have a signal that runs in our brain, and part of our brain begins to develop that says, I can't sustain myself. And so we start, in psychology, they call it a negative inhibitive habit pattern. So we go from I can pull the tablecloth, and I can, on a beautiful Sunday when you're having Sunday lunch with the entire family, I can race onto the road, I can do anything, until we hear this word no. Now, no has such a visceral reaction in us because it's the way it's usually expressed to us. Like, very seldom do parents say no. Usually they go, no. So they create this incredible negative K, or negative kinesthetic, in the word no. So we don't get food when we really want it, and we realize that we can't get it. We're told no. And so we start limiting ourselves. All of a sudden, we've got to ask for permission for things, putting up hands, all that sort of stuff, conforming. So we start to realize within ourselves at an unconscious level that we can't. I can't. I can't earn my own income. I've got to get a job. Please, sir, can I have a job? And so what happens is a lot of that conditioning basically has us in feast and famine. Quite often we keep going until the money starts running down, and all of a sudden we freak out, and then we work, hustle. And so, we get so limited. And when you ask people, when you say to people, how do you grow your income? People will give you the standard, you got to work harder. And all of a sudden they go, no, you got to work smarter. No, you got to work longer. You got to get a mentor. You got to network. You got to create a side hustle. You got to lie, cheat, and steal. Now all of that completely misses it. It completely misses it. It's not anything to do with what you do or what you think. It's how you think. It's all the inner stuff. And equally, if we think about it in the context of marketing and the context of advertising, which I was over on the dark side there at one point in my life. I worked in advertising, and advertising is what you're doing is essentially you're training your customers. You're training them.
Yeah.
And the thing that you do, and a lot of people don't realize this, but I've worked in advertising long enough to know that if you think about feelings, so what happens, the most expensive spots on television, for example, is the news, or drama movies.
Mm.
And so what happens is people watch those and the tone is like this. There's been a stabbing today in Bondi, and let's sensationalize it as much as we can, because we want to scare the shit out of you. Because in a moment we're going to put on an ad, and you're going to feel quite different, and that's going to cause you to buy something. So here we go. We're going to go to the ad. Oh, what a feeling! So all of a sudden we go from somber, horrible, horrible, horrible to relief. And so what happens is, the large majority of people are so conditioned to go, oh, we need to buy another car, and then they go out and buy another car. So we are taught to spend. Here's something that I want to share with your listeners today. I coach so many people who are struggling financially, but are making a ton of money. Because what they do, they go out and they go, oh, I've got to buy an S-Class Merc. I've got to present myself as successful, because I'm not. I've got to buy a bigger house. I've got to get an Armani suit. I've got to get a gold watch. And so many people go out and buy things they really don't need, and they put themselves in such hock to be able to present an image to people that they are not. And I know this because I've coached so many people who are really frustrated. And then I go, hey, I coached a couple that were depressed, both of them, depressed. And they go, Rik, help me with this depression. I find the cause. The cause is financial. It's money, And so what I do is I go, okay, we're doing a complete asset audit. We do this asset audit. We discover their net worth is $6.8 million. And I said, do you realize right now, if you wanted to, you could stop working for the rest of your life and live like a king? And they realized it. And I said, if you choose to send your family over to Bali, for the rest of your generations, you could live off that 6.8 million quite easily. So the thing is, people often don't realize how rich they are. Mm. People often don't realize how abundant they are. I'll preface this by saying this is terrible. But if all of a sudden anyone listening right now had their children kidnapped and they were asked to raise $1 million, they would, and they could, because the need is big, and they will move heaven and earth. So it's a little bit like this. Many years ago, I was taught what money really is, and I was taught it with a paperclip, and I was taught to turn that paperclip into hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so you sit there and you think, how the hell am I going to turn this paperclip into hundreds of thousands of dollars? So what you do is eventually you work out that what you have, your riches, is your value. And if you can translate that value and you can say, I'll give you this paperclip for $100, but what I'll also give you with this paperclip is I'll give you a coaching session and I'll turn your life around. All you have to do is pay me $100 for this paperclip. So someone will say, yes, deal. There's $100. Now I have $100. Now I can actually say, I'll give you $100 for this. And so what you do is you grab that $100 and you think, what can I buy for $100 that I can sell for $200? Or I could add some value to that to sell it for $400. And before you know it, you've got $400. Then you've got $400. And you go, okay, what can I do with that $400? And I've seen people do this, and people end up with 20,000, 40,000 just from a paperclip. But the thing that we've got to understand, the real game of money is the internal game. It's all about the inside, not the outside. If we work on the inside, we can create anything on the outside.
Tony Robbins talks about, I'm sure you've seen it. He was doing a talk, and it was the guy that was beaten in the presidential race against George W. Bush. They had a count back or something, and Tony Robbins asked this guy about resources. Didn't have enough resources, and the gentleman says, "Yeah, I didn't have enough supreme judges." Jokingly, ha ha. And Tony Robbins says to him, he says, "It wasn't about the resources. You weren't resourceful enough."
Yes.
So it's not about what resources we have, because there's always a conversation about, well, I haven't got this and I haven't got that. I haven't got rich friends, or I haven't got access to this. But it's not about the access and the resources. It's about how we think and how resourceful we are. Going back to what you said before, I've got $100. What can I do to turn that 100 into 2, 3, 4, 5, 600? So it's a completely different mindset, mate. I want to go back. I want to go back to something that you've already spoken about, but again, I just want to touch on it briefly. You were talking about the CEOs that you coach and rock stars and goodness knows whatever else. One of the consistent themes that I've seen as well as a public speaking and communication trainer and coach is, again, it doesn't matter what level these people come to me as, whether they're a student about to do a PhD or a CEO of a huge real estate conglomerate. There's a consistent theme, right? It's imposter syndrome. It's like, I'm going to be found out. I'm a fraud. And then adding on to that is, again, like you said, they're comparing themselves to other people, to they've got more money than I've got. They've got a bigger house. They've got a bigger car, whatever the case may be. Concisely, how can we convince people, or how can we tell people that comparing, like, where is that coming from internally, and how can we stop doing that? Because it doesn't serve us.
It just simply comes from bad advice. And the bad advice is usually wrapped up in a hackneyed type saying, but often there are many hackneyed type sayings that are complete myths. And that's that saying, fake it till you make it.
Oh, yeah.
Many people, well, it might be a good strategy to get started, but it's a terrible strategy to stick to while you're in the role. One thing that I love when I work with CEOs and, high level people, I love it when we finally get to that conversation. And, I can remember one particular gentleman, he was doing really, really well. And he came to me at one point and he said, "Rik, it's time to do the deep stuff." A lot of intellectual people in our coaching will do all the strategic and practical and stuff. And a lot of the executives that I work with will give me, how do I practically do this? How do I physically do that?
Yep.
And I love it when we get to the deep stuff. And this particular client said, he told me that he was being bullied on a board. And he said, "I know this sounds a little whimsical, but I'm being bullied. I feel like I'm being bullied on this board." And I said, "Is this the first time?" And he said, "No, it's not, weirdly." And I said, "Okay, so let's work on that." So he had this imposter syndrome that was going on, but quite often the way the brain works, and regardless of how smart you are, regardless of how successful you are, we all have this mechanism in our brain, and that is that our brain basically is a very amazing system. What it does is it experiences through our senses what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, see. It puts it somewhere. it puts that information somewhere, but it classifies it as good or bad. And so this particular guy, we discovered that his problem happened at 17. The reason he was being bullied all the time actually was him attracting it. And so what happened is they went to a shopping center. He's 17 years old. He's with his parents, and it's in the 70s. And he feels very uncool being with his parents. And they could see that he's moping around the joint. So they say, look, his dad says, here's the keys. Go to the car or find something else to do. We'll be back there at an agreed time. So he's walking through the shopping center, and there's a group of guys who just signal him out, make a comment. And all of a sudden, to cut a long story short, he is now bolting through this shopping center with these guys chasing him. He's thinking, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? So the only thing he can think to do is to go into the car to protect himself. So, this is before the days of doot, doot.
Yeah.
And he's trying to get the key in the car, and he opens the door and closes the door, locks the car. And these guys have got these platform shoes on, and they're now kicking at the panels of this car. So you could imagine he's freaking out. Finally, someone sees this and screams out, and they all run off. But he's now left in a car with beaten up panels. He's got to make a decision. What am I going to do? And am I going to tell my parents about this? He goes, no, that's too shameful. So he lowers his vibration to 20 hertz. He gets out of the car, locks it up, sneaks away, then finds his parents, and then they all go back to the car. The big scene. Oh, my God, what has happened to the car? And he's got to act like it's a surprise to him too. Yeah. So it's a lie. It's a lie that he's been carrying for all of his life. His parents, even at this point, don't even know what happened to this day. And so what's going on in his brain? He's saying, I'm a liar. I'm a liar. I'm weak. I'm not as strong as them. And this was the program that he was running. We did some work, got rid of that. Next session, how did you go after doing that work? He said, this is freaky, Rik. You're not going to believe this. All the bullying stopped, just stopped like that. And I go, and I'm not going to believe this.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize. Events and decisions that we make in the past are actually attracting our current life. So, and this is the fraud factor that exists in a lot of people. Like there are things that we've all done that we're shameful for or blameful for, or we're angry or sad, but our emotions, how we feel, is basically a magnet that draws things to us or repels things. And we are drawing these realities to us based on our brain. It's really as simple as that.
Rik, I'm sure it's a common thing that you hear in the coaching space, and people will come to you and say, look, Rik, I know you helped John, Harry, Jenny and whatever, but I'm different. You don't understand. Yes. My problems are different.
Yeah.
That's not going to work for me. What's your response to that comment?
Well, the first thing that I'm not going to do is I'm not going to get into a yes, it is, no, it's not, yes, it is, no, it's not. The thing that I've got to do is we've got to be respectful when we're in a one-on-one space. And, we don't really want to get into an argument.
No.
So the thing that I'll do is I'll just simply agree. I'll say, that's true. You are unique, you are individual, and we will do something else. So what I'll do is probably do exactly the same tactic, but slightly differently, and present it slightly differently, and then get that result. And then once we get the result, that person doesn't care how they actually got the result. They just really want the result. And So what you're often doing, like when you're working with someone one-on-one, I think the most important thing is be respectful. Be really, really, really respectful to where they are. I've had people over the years who have come to me and go, Rik, you wouldn't understand. I've got an issue with alcohol, like a big issue with alcohol. I go, you want an arm wrestle on that? I used to have an issue with alcohol too. So that's gone. It can go for you too. So a lot of people think that a lot of people think I walk on water. I don't. I sink just like everybody else. But the thing is, I've just learnt some things, through life, and that's what I love so much about humanity. Anyone can achieve anything. If someone's achieved it before, you can achieve it too. It's just, we've got to get rid of the labels that we place on ourselves.
Yeah.
And humans, we are meaning-making machines. We put meaning on everything, and we think, well, I can't get there because I'm shorter than you, or I can't get there because I'm younger or older than you, or I can't get there because I'm a woman or I'm a man, and that's all really nonsense. But I can't tell them that that's nonsense.
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
I was working with a lady yesterday, for example, and she started telling me some stories, and her life has been terrible. She had 3 houses in Byron Bay. She was doing really, really well, and it all just
through circumstances
fell out of her fingers. And she said, why did that happen? And I said, it happened quite simply. Your self-esteem was here. The value of your properties were here. You had to lift your self-esteem to the value of your properties, to keep them. And so she keeps telling me these stories. And I said, look, in our second session, I'm going to do this. I hope this is okay, but I'm going to do this. I do not want to hear any of your stories for the second time. So I don't want you to hear your stories for the second time, because we have reasons, and our reasons always will get us results. So if we want different results, we've got to have different reasons.
Mate, so true. Look, Rik, I'm fascinated by this stuff. I really am, and I could talk to you for hours. And perhaps there's an opportunity to look at a future catch up for our audience, mate. What I would ask, if you'd be so kind, is as we close, is some simple, I guess, Rik's top 3 takeaways or strategies that the audience can do. And particularly what I love, what you mentioned earlier about, particularly the value of the property was here and her self-esteem was down here. And I always say to people about their ability to speak in public is directly a correlation to their confidence or how they view themselves.
Totally.
What are some, as I said, what are your top 3 tips and or strategies to build self-esteem, but also to help attract more money and keep it?
I would say that I created a formula many years ago. I used to have many sleepless nights just laying there going, how can I simplify this? How can I create a path that everyone can come through and get a result at the end? And I recognized that the value was ADD, ADD. So the first thing you have to do is you've got to accept where you are. Don't deny it. Don't pretend it's not there. Accept where you are, and accept that all your thinking and all your history and all your experiences and all you are has got you to that place. So there's a lot of insights in that first step, and that is don't blame. Don't blame. Don't blame other people for where you are. Take full responsibility for it. The next thing that you've got to do is the first D is decide. Decide where you want to go. Where do you really want to go? And I set a task for one of my clients yesterday. I said, look, our home play, what I want you to do between now and our next session, I want you to grab a Harry Potter wand, and I want you to put on paper everything that you want me to help you to achieve. Everything. All the stuff, 2 pieces of paper, all the stuff you want to get rid of, and all the stuff that you want to manifest. So I want those 2 pieces of paper before our next session. A digital copy will be okay. So the next is decide what you really, really want. And then the third and most important piece is detach from everything you are not that keeps leading to destruction, ruin, financial loss, depression, sadness. Because without getting rid of those things, it's just going to be the same cycle. I did a YouTube video recently, and it was the universe's warning, I called it. And we've heard this, most of us have heard this saying that the universe kind of whispers in your ear.
I love this.
Tickles you with a feather and bang, slams you with a train. And the reason I did the video is I'm noticing that so many people now are being hit with the train, because they haven't done something. They haven't really done something about their issues and problems. And it's not a curse. It's not because you're a bad person or any of that. It's kind of like, if I can call it the universe for the sake of everyone's religious, spiritual beliefs, the universe is just simply saying, dude, you can be amazing. We know it, but you don't know it yet. You've got to just get rid of those things that are really getting in your way. Like, I think about the world. Every single person I coach, every single person I train is another person out there in the world doing some good things. And so the happier we are, the more content, the more helpful we are, the kinder we are to one another. That is the world that I want for my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so forth. And that's why I do what I do.
No truer words spoken, Rik. Mate, again, I appreciate you so much for taking your time to be on our program and to share your valuable insights and experience with my audience, both viewers and listeners. And I really look forward to catching up again. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today has been Rik Schnabel, who is a master coach, mentor, author. My name is Con. I am the conversationalist. And until next time, bye for now.